Rain drizzled over New York City, a thin mist softening the sharp glow of streetlights. The roads were slick, cars whispered by, and a black Cadillac rolled through the quiet of Brooklyn. Inside sat Don Vincenzo Marcelli, the man whose calm could silence a room and whose anger could burn a city. Across from him were his two sons, Luca and Enzo, both forged in the shadow of their father yet molded by very different fires. At dinner, Vincenzo cut his steak with the precision of a surgeon. "They call this city a jungle," he murmured, voice calm, almost philosophical. "But in the jungle, animals kill for food. Here, men kill for respect." Luca nodded slowly, his eyes steady, the thinker between the brothers. "And sometimes for pride," he added. Enzo smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Or money." Vincenzo's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Money comes and goes. Pride lasts until it gets you killed." For a moment, only the faint hum of jazz filled the room. The Don looked at his sons, one calm, one restless, and said, "Tomorrow, we meet the Calderas. The peace between our families is fragile. I want no surprises." "We'll handle it," Luca said. Enzo leaned forward. "And if they try anything?" "They won't," Vincenzo cut him off, his tone like steel wrapped in silk. "Because they respect us." But there was something in his eyes, something that didn't match the confidence of his voice. He sipped his wine, the red reflecting in the candlelight like blood. Across the river, the docks whispered with the sound of crates being moved under cover of night. Men worked fast, their shadows long and nervous. Anthony Gravano, known as Tony to the family, oversaw the job. He was a loyal soldier, the kind who'd take a bullet before he'd break a promise. As he watched the crates being unloaded, he flicked his cigarette and said, "Keep it quiet. No cops, no mistakes. The Don wants this clean." But the night had other plans. Headlights flared suddenly in the fog. Before Tony could react, gunfire shattered the silence. Two of his men dropped instantly. He dove behind a truck, returned fire, the echoes rolling like thunder against the water. After a few desperate minutes, the attackers vanished into the dark. Tony rushed to one of his fallen men, a young kid barely 20. "Stay with me, kid," he muttered, but the boy's eyes were already glassy, his breath gone. Tony exhaled smoke, his jaw tight. "Calderas," he whispered bitterly. "It's gotta be." Back in the Marcelli mansion, Luca found his father standing near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears. "Tony called," Luca said quietly. "The shipment was hit. 2 men dead." Vincenzo didn't move. "How bad?" "They took half the weapons," Luca replied. "It was planned. And you think it's the Calderas? Who else would have the nerve?" Vincenzo turned from the window, his face unreadable. "No assumptions," he said softly. "War without proof is suicide." "And if proof comes?" Luca asked. Vincenzo's eyes darkened. "Then we remind them who built this city." Across town, in a smoky back room behind a jazz club, Don Salvatore Caldera held court over a poker game. He was charming, with a smile that could disarm and a mind that could kill. "Marcelli still thinks he runs this town," he said, laying down his cards. "But times change." His consigliere, Marcello Romano, leaned forward. "He still controls the unions, the docks, half the police." Salvatore took a sip of whiskey, eyes glittering. "Then we take the other half. Piece by piece. No blood if we can help it. But if blood comes, it won't be ours." He placed an ace of spades on the table and smirked. It's time the Marcellis learned humility. The next morning, the sky hung gray over a cemetery in Brooklyn. The funeral procession moved slowly through the mist. Tony walked beside the coffin of the dead men, face carved in stone. Luca and Enzo followed close behind, black coats rippling in the cold wind. "You know who did this," Enzo muttered under his breath. "Why are we still waiting?" "Because father plays the long game," Luca replied. Enzo's jaw tightened. "And while he plays, we bleed." Tony, walking ahead, turned his head slightly. "Save it. The Don's right. We strike too soon, we lose everything." "You sound like him," Enzo said bitterly. Tony stopped, his eyes hard. "I am like him. That's why I'm still alive." Later that night, the family gathered for dinner. The air was thick, the silence louder than words. Enzo stabbed at his steak as though it had wronged him. "You know what people are saying," he finally blurted. "They're saying we're weak. That the Marcellis lost their teeth." "People always talk," Vincenzo said, barely looking up. "Let them. You sit here drinking wine while they rob us blind. Enzo shouted, slamming his fork down. The sound made Luca flinch. Vincenzo's eyes lifted slowly, like a lion deciding whether to kill. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You think strength is noise, boy. Real power whispers. Enzo's chest heaved, but he said nothing. Vincenzo took a calm sip of wine, the moment already over for him. Luca exchanged a glance with Tony, who sat in silence nearby. They both knew this tension was growing into something dangerous. Later that night, Enzo stood outside, smoking under the porch light. Tony joined him, hands in his coat pockets. You should watch that temper, Tony said. Enzo exhaled a stream of smoke. You think I'm wrong? Tony shrugged. Doesn't matter. You talk like that to your father again, and he won't kill you, but he'll make you wish he had. Enzo laughed quietly. You ever wonder if he still cares about any of us? Tony looked at him for a long moment. He cares more than you'll ever know. But in his way. You'll understand when you're his age. A car passed down the street. They both watched its taillights disappear, the city humming faintly in the distance. Somewhere, the storm was already brewing. The following day, Luca met with a police captain in a small cafe on Fifth Avenue. The man looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. You didn't get this from me, the captain whispered, sliding a folded paper across the table. Caldera's men have been moving crates through Pier 47. Same night your shipment was hit. Luca pocketed the paper and nodded. You've done good. The Don will remember it. As Luca stepped out into the sunlight, his expression was cold. Proof. That's what his father wanted. And now they had it. That evening, Luca returned home and handed the paper to his father. Vincenzo unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning every line. Then, without a word, he burned it in the fireplace. Enzo frowned. What are you doing? We move when the time is right, Vincenzo said, watching the ashes rise. Not when anger tells us to. Enzo shook his head and stormed out of the room. Luca stayed, silent. Vincenzo finally spoke, more to himself than to his son. War is not about bullets. It's about timing. You strike once, and it must be final. Outside, the rain began again, soft but endless. And in another corner of the city, Don Salvatore Caldera raised a glass of bourbon and smiled. He had no idea that, for the first time in a long while, Don Vincenzo Marcelli was about to stop waiting. Days passed with the silence of a loaded gun. Brooklyn seemed to breathe differently, the air thicker, charged with something everyone could feel but no one could name. Don Vincenzo appeared calm, going about his routines, drinking espresso in the morning, reading the newspaper as if the world hadn't started plotting against him. But in his quiet moments, his gaze drifted, thoughtful and heavy, like a man seeing a storm long before it breaks. Luca moved through the family's business with precision. Meetings, money, shipments, all kept steady. But Enzo, restless and impatient, was slipping from his father's control. He spent his nights in smoky bars, talking to men who whispered too much and drank even more. One of them was Carlo Rizzo, a small-time enforcer with too much ambition and not enough sense. Your old man's gone soft, Carlo said one night, lighting a cigarette. The city's changing. If the Marcellis don't adapt, the Calderas will own everything. Enzo leaned back, anger flashing in his eyes. My father's not soft. Then why aren't we hitting back? Carlo pressed. They took your men, your product, your names on the street for the wrong reasons. Enzo didn't answer. The truth was, he didn't know anymore. His loyalty to his father warred with his pride, and pride was winning. He drained his drink and stood. You talk too much, Carlo. Carlo smirked. And you act too slow. That night, Enzo made a call that would change everything. Meanwhile, Luca visited Tony at the docks. The air smelled of salt and rust. We've confirmed it, Luca said quietly. The Calderas hit the shipment. My father knows, but he's waiting. Tony nodded. Waiting for what? A sign from God. For an opening, Luca replied. Something that'll end this without destroying the city. Tony laughed dryly. End it. You don't end wars like this. You survive them. Before Luca could respond, a car backfired nearby. Both men instinctively reached for their guns. They waited. Silence. Tony exhaled, lowering his weapon. See, even the damn city's jumpy. Luca looked out at the water. If we're not careful, we'll lose everything he built. That evening, Vincenzo received an unexpected visitor, Marcello Romano, the Caldera's consigliere. Two men escorted him in, guns visible under their coats. The Don sat behind his desk, hands folded. "Marcello," he greeted coolly. "You have nerve showing your face here." Marcello smiled faintly. "Salvatore sends his regards. He says this misunderstanding at the docks need not escalate." Vincenzo leaned forward. "Misunderstanding? 2 of my men are dead." Marcello shrugged. "The city's a dangerous place. Sometimes accidents happen." "Accidents don't come with bullet holes," Vincenzo said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were blades. Marcello's smile faltered. "We don't want war, Don Vincenzo. You've ruled long enough to know it profits no one. Then perhaps your Don should remember who taught him how to profit." Marcello stood, straightening his coat. "A word of advice, old friend. The world is changing. You can either adapt, or be replaced." He left the room with a smirk. Vincenzo sat still for a long time, his jaw tightening. Luca entered moments later. "What did he say?" Vincenzo looked up, his expression distant. "He said the world is changing." "And what do you say?" Luca asked. "I say," Vincenzo murmured, "it's time we remind them it still belongs to us." That night, Enzo gathered a handful of loyal men, Carlo among them, and drove to Pier 47 without his father's permission. The wind howled across the dark water as they prepared to strike a Caldera shipment. "No survivors," Enzo said, his voice sharp. "They started this. We finish it." The ambush went fast and bloody. Gunfire tore through the air. Men screamed, fell, and vanished into the black waves. By the time it was over, the pier burned, and Enzo stood over the wreckage breathing hard, his hands shaking. Carlo grinned beside him. "Now that's what I call a message." But the message went to the wrong person. By morning, the newspapers screamed of Mafia war in Brooklyn. 3 innocent dockworkers had been caught in the crossfire. The police were furious. Politicians called for crackdowns. The Calderas retaliated instantly. One of Vincenzo's gambling houses went up in flames before noon. In the mansion, Vincenzo threw the paper across the room. "Who did this?" Enzo stepped forward. "I did. They hit us first." "You fool," Vincenzo hissed. "You think this is about pride? You've turned business into chaos. They killed our men. And now you've killed the city's peace." Vincenzo shouted, his voice thunderous for the first time. "Do you know what that costs? Every cop, every judge I've paid will turn on us now." Luca tried to intervene. "Father, it's done. We have to contain it." "Contain it?" Vincenzo's gaze cut to Enzo. "You will go nowhere. You will speak to no one. You've done enough damage." Enzo's face hardened, wounded and furious. "You taught me to fight. I taught you to win," Vincenzo said coldly. "And you've already lost." That night, Enzo packed his things. He ignored Tony's attempts to stop him and disappeared into the city, his pride bleeding more than any wound could. Luca watched him go from the doorway but said nothing. In the days that followed, violence exploded across the boroughs. Cars burned. Men vanished. Every headline dripped with blood and betrayal. Luca moved quietly, trying to keep what little order remained. Tony handled the streets with ruthless precision, protecting the Marcelli businesses from the Caldera's push. But the tide was turning. Salvatore had younger men, bolder men, and fewer morals. One evening, as Luca was leaving a meeting, he found a note slipped under his car door. "Meet me at St. Agnes Church. Midnight." No signature. He knew immediately who it was. At midnight, he found Enzo sitting in a pew, shadows hiding his face. "You shouldn't have come," Enzo said. "You called me." Enzo looked up, eyes hollow. "It's over, Luca. They've got everyone. Carlo betrayed me. He's with Salvatore now." Luca's stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "They know everything, our routes, our men, the safe houses. Carlo sold it all for money and a promise." Luca clenched his fists. "You trusted him." Enzo's laugh was bitter. "I trusted someone, for once. That's what I get." A creak echoed through the church. Both men froze. Then, gunfire erupted through the stained glass. Luca pulled Enzo down behind a pew as bullets shattered the silence. The air filled with dust and screams. Enzo fired back blindly. Then silence again. Luca looked around cautiously. "You hit." Enzo groaned, clutching his side. Blood soaked through his shirt. Luca ripped off his coat and pressed it against the wound. "Stay with me." Enzo grinned weakly. Father's gonna kill me if I die in a church. Shut up, Luca muttered, dragging him toward the back door. They escaped through the alley, but Enzo was fading fast. By the time Tony arrived with the car, Enzo's eyes were half closed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I could make him proud. Luca's voice broke. You did, Enzo. You always did. But Enzo didn't hear it. His head fell against his brother's shoulder, and the city went quiet again. When Luca brought the body home, Vincenzo didn't speak for hours. He just sat by his son's side, staring at the stillness that once burned so fiercely. Tony stood guard at the door, his face blank but his eyes wet. When Vincenzo finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. They killed my boy. Luca looked at him. They'll pay. Vincenzo rose slowly, older than he had ever looked. No, he said. They'll beg. From that night on, the Marcellis stopped waiting. Every contact, every favor, every hidden alliance was called in. Money flowed like water. Silence followed every name the Don spoke. The war was no longer about business or respect, it was personal now.